All right, so diving in. I know you guys deal with uncertainty all the time and decisions that leave you with worry and anxiety.
Yeah, for sure.
And this verse that we got, Isaiah 41:10, really seems relevant, especially for tough times.
Yeah, it does.
It says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God." So we are going to explore this idea of faith over fear today.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a really powerful verse. And I think it's interesting, it really speaks to like the human experience, fear.
Definitely. It does acknowledge that fear is a very natural thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't say don't, never be afraid. It just says don't let fear control you, which I think is really important and a very subtle but important distinction.
Absolutely. It offers like two things that I think are really helpful to hold on to when we are feeling afraid or fearful.
Okay.
The first is this idea that God is with you. That sense of not being alone, of having something bigger than ourselves alongside us. I think that can be incredibly grounding.
Yeah, it's like that feeling of someone holding your hand when you're walking in the dark. It's scary, but you've got someone there with you.
Exactly. And then the second part, I am your God, it kind of takes it a step further. It's this source of strength. There's a power that's beyond our own, something that we can tap into.
It makes me think about how we often face two different types of fear. The kind that keeps us safe, like looking both ways before you cross the street,
Right.
and the kind that can paralyze us, like that what if type of fear that keeps us from actually moving forward.
That's a great point. And I think faith comes into play a lot with that second type of fear.
Makes sense.
It's about trusting that even if we can't control everything, even if it doesn't go exactly as planned, that there's something bigger that is kind of looking over us and holding us.
So you're saying it's not about pretending like challenges aren't real or that everything's going to be perfect?
No, not at all. I think it's more about focusing on the bigger picture, the deeper truth. It helps us to see that we can move through challenges and still have peace, even when we don't have all the answers.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But how do we actually implement that in our everyday life? Like, let's say we're facing a really tough decision,
Yeah.
like maybe taking a new job, something that feels risky but really exciting at the same time.
Yeah.
How do we apply that in that situation?
Yeah, and I think that's a great example too. I think a lot of times people think that you're going to get like a booming voice, like, hey, this is what you should do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always happen like that. Sometimes it's more about creating space, creating that space for stillness, for listening, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe it's prayer, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's journaling, whatever that looks like for you, but just something to connect with that inner voice.
You know what? That actually makes me think about, I was reading about different forms of prayer. And there's a specific form of prayer where, you ask for specific things to happen in your life. But there's also a contemplative prayer where you're really just quieting your mind and listening for guidance.
Yes.
And maybe that's where that courage starts, is being still enough to actually hear what your intuition is telling you.
I think so. I think you're right. And, a lot of times that guidance can even come from other people, mentors, people you trust, even a stranger that might give you a different perspective.
Right.
It's about just being open to receiving wisdom from different avenues, from different sources.
So trusting, but also, taking action.
Right.
Not just sitting there waiting for a sign, but actively seeking out advice and then
Yep.
having that courage to act.
Exactly. And, even when fear creeps in, because it will, just remembering that verse, remembering that we're not alone in this, it can give us the strength to take that next step.
I love that saying that courage isn't the absence of fear, but acting in spite of fear. And maybe that's where faith really comes into play. It's that fuel that allows us to move forward even when we're afraid.
Yeah, I love that. I think you said that beautifully. And it's not about being fearless. It's learning to kind of dance with fear, knowing that we have something to hold on to,
Yeah.
that there is a source of strength that we can lean on.
I love that visual. This has been such an insightful conversation. And I think, the key takeaway for me at least is that choosing faith over fear is a continuous ongoing practice.
Yes.
It's not something that you arrive at. And it's a practice that can lead us to, I think, the deeper sense of peace and purpose. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. Where in your life could you use a little bit of extra courage this week? What step, big or small, could you take to move you toward your dreams, even if it feels a little bit scary? Remember, you're not alone, and you have that strength inside of you that's bigger than any fear.
Yes.
And that's it for this deep dive.
Awesome.